Since the dawn of LEGO in 1932, one thing that LEGO fans can't get enough of are minifigures. Whether it's because of the playful simplicity minifigures like the astronaut have, or the extreme attention to detail on minifigures like the Joker, one thing can be said for certain: everyone loves minifigures. But this wasn't always the case. In fact, at one point in time, minifigures weren't even something that LEGO was manufacturing. So how exactly did minifigures go from zero to hero in such a short amount of time? Well, it's your lucky day, because today I'll be going over the entire evolution of LEGO minifigures. Let's go. I'm sure most of you watching this video know how the story begins. In 1978, LEGO released the first official minifigure, the police officer. But did you know that before then, LEGO had already done some experimenting with figures? Back in 1974, so 4 years before the first official minifigure, LEGO released these things called LEGO building figures. They have round yellow heads and pretty minimal facial features. They also have movable arms, torsos, and legs that are all made of LEGO bricks. The figures were a great success, and set number 200 in particular sells very well. From here, LEGO knew that there was a market for figures, so as the years went on, they continued to test the waters. The main problem with the building figures was that they were a little too tall, and once they were built, nothing could really be done with them. Their solution for this was this minifigure, which was first seen in set 370 in 1976. These minifigures were what sparked everything. Obviously, these guys aren't anything special by today's standards. They have no faceplate, no arms, and you can't even separate the legs. But what they did have were attachable feet. Stud holes on the bottom of minifigures were first made on these guys, and as we all know, every single minifigure has them now. So it really was a revolutionary innovation. These stud holes made it so the minifigure could be attached to any LEGO stud, and it would actually stay in place. But this wasn't enough for LEGO. They knew they could do better, and that's exactly what they did. 2 years later, in 1978, the police officer was released in set 600, and from there, everything changed. The set was an instant hit. Everybody was absolutely in love with the police officer minifigure. LEGO knew they had struck gold, so the only thing left to do was get creative. That same year, the LEGO Town, LEGO Space, and LEGO Castle themes were all created, and with them came some insane minifigures. The police officer was from the town theme, but for the other two, we got the original LEGO astronauts and an assortment of LEGO knights. For the next 10 years, there wasn't much of a difference between a lot of the minifigures. They were all the same color yellow, and they all had the exact same faceplate too. But in 1989, LEGO kicked it up a notch when they introduced the LEGO pirate theme. The best example of that is set 6251, Pirate Minifigures. The set is literally just 5 minifigures finding some treasure. But for 1989, this was insane. These 5 brand new minifigures were revolutionary. They were way more detailed than any minifigure that had come before them. I mean, just look at these faceplates. The designs printed on the body and legs were also nothing short of astounding. But the best part about these minifigures is that LEGO went way out of the box. Captain Redbeard was given a peg leg instead of the 2 legs a minifigure would usually get. So not only was LEGO playing around with faceplates, outfits, and accessories, but they were also experimenting with the fundamentals of minifigures. Once again, LEGO got a little comfortable after this, and didn't make that many changes for quite a while. But after about 10 more years, they'd reinvent the wheel again with LEGO Star Wars. As we all know, it's pretty obvious that LEGO Star Wars is one of the most popular LEGO themes of all time. The fact is, if you start getting into LEGO, you're gonna run into LEGO Star Wars one way or another. But I don't think you guys realize just how much this singular theme affected the entire course of minifigures. One of the biggest innovations for minifigures was the introduction of short legs. Believe it or not, these leg pieces are actually decently new, and the first minifigure to ever have them was Yoda back in 2002. From there on, they'd be used on minifigures like children, gnomes, goblins, and many others. But the craziest thing about this Yoda minifigure wasn't the fact that his legs were shorter. Yoda's headpiece was way different when compared to anything people had seen from LEGO in the past. He's far from human, so LEGO had no choice but to make a completely new head model specifically for Yoda. The thing about Star Wars, though, was that this was the case for a bunch of different characters. Some of the most drastic being Darth Maul, who has horns on his head, Jar Jar Binks, who has even bigger ears than Yoda, and R2-D2, who isn't even human. For each and every one of these characters, LEGO was forced to think outside of the box and improvise. But they did this a little earlier than 2002 with Yoda. As a matter of fact, the first minifigure that used a new head model was Jar Jar Binks back in 1999. For a character like this, there was no way LEGO could have used the traditional traditional cylinder head that they'd been using all this time. And if they did, I doubt LEGO Star Wars would have been as successful as it is now. A lot of the minifigures would have ended up with extremely flat faces and weird looking heads when compared to their character in the movie. So incorporating the third dimension was definitely the right call. But for some characters, LEGO had to take it even further. For Chewbacca, instead of making just a headpiece, they actually made a piece that had the head and chest together as one. This piece would then be slid on top of the minifigure's body and act as two pieces instead of one. This wasn't the case for R2-D2 though. He's a droid that doesn't resemble a human in the slightest bit. So how was LEGO supposed to pull off something like this? Well, for this one, they decided to incorporate some design aspects from the LEGO Technic line. His head was made from a silver dome, his body was a cylinder with 4 stud holes on top and 2 holes in the side, and his legs were 2 white parts that had Technic pins attached to the sides. So what you'd have to do here is attach the head on top of the body and snap the 2 legs into place on either side, and bam, you had yourself your very own R2-D2 minifigure. Now, I could ramble on and on about how much LEGO Star Wars changed the game for minifigures, but that would probably get a little boring. So let's move on to something new. Around the time all of this was happening with LEGO Star Wars, LEGO was also dipping their toes into the action figure industry. What I'm talking about is LEGO Bionicle, which was first seen in 2001. Now, before you say it, I know, Bionicles aren't technically minifigures, but they're still a very important part of minifigure history. Bionicle was one of the biggest LEGO themes of its time, and to this day, many fans are still upset about its retirement. What separated Bionicle from the rest of LEGO was the fact that every set was a figurine, and they were all made using pieces from the Technic line. This was the first time that LEGO had done something like this, and let me remind you, they hadn't randomly introduced new figures to the world since 1974, so this was a pretty big deal. Bionicle's original run lasted from 2001 to 2010, so a total of 9 years. In that time though, LEGO released hundreds of sets under the theme, and they even launched a show on Cartoon Network based on the storyline. From there, the theme was brought back in 2015 to 2016, and then once more in 2023. I'm not really sure what their goal is with Bionicle, but regardless, it's still one of the most successful LEGO figure themes ever. Getting back to the minifigures, there are hundreds of examples I could give that show off how they've evolved throughout the early 2000s. We have General Grievous from LEGO Star Wars, Hagrid from LEGO Harry Potter, and 4 different versions of LEGO Mickey Mouse. But what I want to talk about are the big changes that LEGO's made along the way. The kind of stuff that reshapes how we see minifigures. And the next time that happened was 2008, with the introduction of Big Figures. Big Figures are basically just LEGO figurines that are taller and sometimes more muscular than regular minifigures. Some of the best examples of these are the Hulk, Thanos, and the Wampa from Star Wars. Before all of these guys and more were made though, LEGO did what they do best and ran an experiment all the way back in 1999. Back then, there was a theme called LEGO Rock Raiders, and we didn't know it at the time, but it was actually the first time we'd ever come across big figures. The rock monsters from this theme were much bigger than any minifigure at the time, and even though LEGO didn't know it, they were actually the reason big figures were even made in the first place. Moving on from that though, let's continue our journey through the early 2000s. Just 1 year after big figures were introduced, LEGO decided to move in the opposite direction and scale down instead of up. These are LEGO micro figures, and they were actually created for the sole purpose of being used in the LEGO Games theme. LEGO Games was a theme made back in 2009, and every set was actually a different game you had to build to play. For some of these games, you needed pieces to represent yourself in the game, like Minotaurus for example. This is where micro figures came into play. Instead of using something like a brick or a stud, LEGO provided micro figures to keep things fun and fresh. They were a perfect fit, especially because they could fit on just one stud. But what's crazy about this is that these aren't even the smallest LEGO figures we've seen. That's right, the rabbit hole goes even deeper. These are LEGO Nano figures, and they were introduced just 1 year after micro figures in 2010. Originally, they were only made in metallic colors and were used to represent trophies and miniature statues. But from 2011 and on, they started printing character designs on them and throwing them in some LEGO sets. Their most famous appearance is in set 71043, Hogwarts Castle. Just like the micro figures, nano figures also only need one stud to be set in place, but the actual character model was much smaller than the stud size. This was perfect for the Hogwarts Castle set, because it allowed LEGO to make some really small rooms and still be able to put characters from the movies in the right spots. For example, there's a scene from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone where Harry, Ron, and Hermione are in a room full of flying keys. This room was actually incorporated into the Hogwarts set, and because of how small nano figures are, LEGO was able to put the 3 characters there, just like how they were in the movie. There are tons of insane details like this all throughout the Hogwarts set that would be a lot harder to pull off if it weren't for nano figures. So this was definitely a smart move from LEGO. For a while after this, LEGO hadn't done anything revolutionary like before, but that didn't mean that the minifigures weren't awesome. This next LEGO theme has some of the most intricate and detailed minifigures minifigures that have ever been made by LEGO. They were made all the way back in 2010, so when you see them, keep in mind how old they are. This is the LEGO Atlantis theme, and it's based on the lost city of Atlantis. As you can imagine, most of the minifigures made for this theme were divers, and they had all sorts of different faceplates and designs. Some of the craziest divers, though, were Axel and Ace. Axel has lights attached on his back to help him see deep underwater, and Ace has a giant propeller on his back to help him move faster. These are some insane additions that hadn't really been done before, at least to this extent. A minifigure with a propeller that big on his back was something we just hadn't seen. Now, these divers might be cool, but what really makes the Atlantis theme stand out are the warrior minifigures. These are the LEGO Shark Warrior, Squid Warrior, Hammerhead Warrior, and Manta Warrior minifigures, and they have some of the coolest headpieces ever made. Believe it or not, these headpieces aren't one giant piece. These minifigures actually have the typical head shape that most minifigures have, but they also have pieces that get attached on top of their head and complete the character. Besides the Shark Warrior, his headpiece is an entirely different thing. Along with that though, the faceplates for these guys are out of this world. The Squid Warrior has some of the most menacing eyes ever, and I don't think I've seen the Manta Warrior faceplate on another minifigure. Regardless, the minifigures from the Atlantis theme overall were a huge step forward for LEGO. This theme was made back in 2010 though, so what's changed with minifigures from then up until now? Well, the truth is there isn't a lot. Because of how much LEGO expanded on their idea in the early days of minifigures, they have so much room to work with in terms of character design. They've innovated everything from faceplates to leg size and even the entire minifigure itself. However, there is one last major change that occurred in the last 14 years. Back in 2016, LEGO introduced the baby minifigure in set 60134, the Fun in the Park set. It was a never before seen minifigure that was so small it actually fit in the hands of regular size minifigures. The mold itself hasn't been used that many times though. It's mainly seen in LEGO City sets, and other than that, it isn't seen that many times. There's the LEGO Jack Jack minifigure from The Incredibles, and then the LEGO Grogu minifigure from The Mandalorian. I gotta say, even though it hasn't been used that much, this baby minifigure has some pretty big names under its belt. What was your favorite minifigure era? Be sure to let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.